Sanbonani Dumelani Ashe. Today we're going to have a conversation about the mythology of the great mother Nomkhubulwane. I'm going to be reading from one of Baba Credo Mutwa's book, Izulu Shaman. The story will be based on the legend, the ancient legend, how they have influenced our cultural life and behavior and social construction and ecological influence, and they mark the yearly calendar. These stories were told in the old time next to the fire, are traditional stories to explain traditional phenomenon or what we call geographical phenomenon, ecological phenomenon, anthropological phenomenon, and other phenomenon like astrological phenomenon. In our last engagement, we did engage about the moon, the blood moon, and we explained the blood moon, and we gave some of the traditional stories that teach us about the blood moon. For today, I would like us to read from this story of the ancient law and ancient knowledge system taught in traditionally by the Africans. It's a story of the introduction. It has some similarity. We're going to have a comparative system on this same story where we'll compare the story into different stories that we can get out there from different tradition, such as the tradition in Sumer, the tradition in in Egypt. And in one of the stories in Egypt, we get Isis. Isis being Isis being taken to a journey of looking for her husband, and her husband is Aset. We all know about Aset and how they came to be. But today we're going to read in the story of the four winds in Zulu Shaman. This is a great story that explain the legends and on how a winter had to be a traditional festive for us, a celebration. Down in the southern hemisphere in this era, by March 21, March 22, March 23, we have what we call the autumn equinox. The autumn equinox, when it took place and happened, that is where we have legends and stories. There's a celebration that people have. Some they call it Isililo Saka Nomkhubulwane. In Sumer, they will call it the lamentation of Inana or the lamentation of Ishtar. In Egypt, they call it the lamentation of Aset. For others, will say the lamentation of Isis. In this case, we're going to learn about Isililo Saka Nomkhubulwane, why it became a lamentation, because these can be explained through legends and the influence that the legends bring with in this case, or they come with in our life. The four winds of the goddess. One day the great mother goddess looked upon the earth and found the human beings were abusing every bit of knowledge that she had given them. She had given them metals and they were using them to make spears, to kill other human beings. She had given them fire, they were using it to burn people's villages. She had given them grains and they were making beer so that there was drunkenness and fighting all over the world. And her great heart filled with sadness at the way of her children, though she loved them still. And then the great mother knew that she had made a mistake by creating human beings, and therefore that soon she will be put on trial by the seven judges of eternity, the Abakul, Bonabakul, as they are called, Now the seven judges of eternity peer into the visible universe, a space outside. They do not enter into it, and they are so austere and terrified and terrible that even the gods tremble before them. So when the great mother goddess was brought into their presence, even she felt fear in the depths of her ancient soul. And Abakulu frowned at the great mother. O imperfect one, they said, you have created an imperfect species, as we knew you would, and so be it. You, being who you are, could not do otherwise. But that does not pardon you from our sentence. You must serve a penitence in the underworld, where lives your sister, the goddess of darkness, Unowoi. Oh, not that, begged the goddess Nomkhubulwane. Her ways are pitiless and unrelenting, but the judges were not inclined to be merciful. She who was beautiful, who loved the earth and the sunlight and the air and the trees and the sweet songs of the birds, was taken and bound and blindfolded and brought down, down, down through the dark and the damp corridor that seems endless, twisting and turning until it seems that the whole mass of the earth lay above her head, into the most forbidden realm of Nohoi, the great goddess of the underworld, her dark sister. Oh, Nohoi was pleased indeed to receive her new guest, for she had long languished in hatred and envy of her bright sister, who had brought into being a world far more beautiful than her own and who was her opposite in every way. Oh, yes, she will make her sister welcome all right. Where the great Earth Mother was generous, Norway was stingy. Where she was loving, Norway hated. Where the Earth Mother Nomkhubulwane created boundlessly and all her children loved her, the great goddess Unohui of the underworld had a population of dark Mayans who served her in hatred and fear. There in the waiting darkness, the great Nomkhubulwane, the mother, was stripped and cruelly tortured by dark Nooi. But Nooi did not torture her body alone. Oh no, oh no. Her cruelty far exceeded that her bright sister's soul suffered the greatest tortures. With glee, the underworld goddess brought forth one of her most loathsome servants, a foul monster, ugly without and within, whose stench was terrible and whose body was repulsive even in the darkly glowing light of the underworld. This is your new husband, smiled Noi, wickedly, and they conduct a wedding ceremony. While the horrid creature of the darkness leered with knowing smile. After the ceremony, the goddess was carried off by this monster and laid upon his noisome wedding bed and had to endure his most intimate caressing and his slimy loving kisses. Then the goddess was forced to wait upon his every whim, like the lowest of servants. For 3 months, the goddess endured this torture until her soul became as sick and weak as her body, and she longed for nothing more than death. But now a strange and a terrible thing began in the world above. For the world that the great earth mother Nomkhubulwane loved, and that she had left, itself became sick. First of all, the green things began to wither and to perish. To the grasses were plantain, and the leaves fell from the trees. Even the lowly mouses and lynches parched and died. Then all of the animals and humans sickened in turn and began to die. Terrible Plagues began to sour the earth. The world was rapidly becoming a desert. Then a great conversation of all living things who were not to seek to attend was called. The beasts all wished and wailed for sadness. Their heads dropped, their once glossy coats were dull and tattered, and those that could weep wept in their way as they remembered how they loved their mother and how much they missed her bountiful presence. And they spoke, whining and groaning and bellowing to each other about what they should do. For if they did nothing, they will all soon be dead. But then an astonishing thing happened. For the birds of the world, all the eagles and hawks, and all the vultures and ospreys, but also all the sparrows and the many nameless songbirds, for all are all the mother's children, children of Nomkhubulwane, came together and made a great prayer by flying across the sky with their many thousands and millions of wings. And as they prayed, flying back and forth, and then in circles, they created with the motion of their wings four great winds. Now, the four great winds, the ones that we call tornadoes nowadays, began dancing across the lands as whirlwinds do, humming and roaring and immensely powerfully. They swept up trees and houses and stones and towered and standard across the landscape until they came humming and roaring to the very entrance to the underworld. Now, even dark and terrible Norway was frightened by the appearance of these tornadoes, and she sent her servant to deter them, to keep them away. But those servants were not snatched by the like the dark damned leaves by a tempest and the whirlwind around the dash against the rock until they perished. Then the four great whirlwinds wrenched loose the gates to the underworld, and without even asking permission entered dark Norway's realm. There was a shrinking in the tunnels of the underworld such as had never been heard before, as all the tubes and the chambers in which the creatures of the underworld dwelt began to howl, like a great organ played by an insane organist. The very rocks and minerals began to vibrate powerfully with a terrible noise. Norway covered her ears at this thing that had ever happened before. Fresh air from the upper world blew into her domain. Air that had been still dank for 1,000 years now welled in gust, beating against the stones of the underworld. This wailing, whistling invasion was something dark Norway had never expected. And she who was fear itself, became frightened. She, the torture, now was tortured by those four winds of irresistible dancing power. These whirlwinds, like living things, knew their mission. They seized the earth mother, Nomkhubulwane, in an embrace most tender for such terrible energy. Ma felt like she was carried on a zephyr, a gentle, sweet summer breeze in the heart of the whirlwind, while the outer corn shrink like the determined demon of the upper air. And so they bore her, whose essence is beauty and light, up through the endless tunnels and corridors. But being winds, they were full of dust and sand. Since that was the near nature, and the goddess became thirsty. And then thirstier, she had not tasted water for so long at last. Overcome by thirst, she asked to be set down so that she could drink a little, just a little of water of the underworld. This she should not have done. For it is a rule of the eternity that whoever drinks of the underworld water now should have to return there until the end of time. But the four great whirlwinds carried the great Nomkhubulwane back to the surface of the earth, and it was good. When their job was done, they dissipated into fasting growing clouds, and all creatures sighed with relief as the rain began to fall and cleanse the earth of its blighting and the stream freshes flow. And then the mighty rivers carried the water to the ocean, and so the earth became green again. And the great earth mother stood that cleansing rain, and the water ran down her hair and her cheeks and all over her body, cleansing her of the taint of the underworld. And she drank her fill of the fresh, clean water and knew happiness again. And the birds of the air dived in soup for sheer joy all around the great Nomkhubulwane, and gave forth their cries, and she laughed and blessed the children who had saved her. But now for the portion of every year, the earth, great mother Nomkhubulwane, sadly withdraw from her creation, and once again take weary step down and down to the underworld. And when she is gone, all of the creation weeps and slumber until she returns again to bless the world with her presence. And so it will be until the end of eternity. This is a story of the great Nomkhubulwane, how she got to the underworld. And it introduced the great Unowoyi, the sister to Unomkhubulwane, whom administrated the underworld. And she had a chance now to present her inquiries, grievance, and vendates towards Nomkhubulwane, because Nomkhubulwane was judged by the Bonabakulu, the great master teachers, the internal one who made the great creation, who are made by seven, who are governors of everything that is all around. Before, there were nine. But we have that story within our YouTube classes and videos where we talk about the norm. So the Bakulu, when they made their judgment, because humanity has already become savageous, misconduct, and they've already contained systems that are darkful and dangerous through the influence that lingers in the shadows of their psyche. It is the influence of Noi, the great Noi, who always grieves and being stingy, according to the legends. So this itself, it's told in the legend on how Noi led a lot of people into murder, savageous behaviors, where they took fire to burn the villages, where they use minerals and ions to build weapons, spears, swords, in order to fight each other. So the elders, the great Abakulu, saw it necessary that they put their verdict to Unomkhubulwane, who have made us as her creation, also known as Mama Ninuvono, or the mother of Abantu. So when this great mother had to go and plea in the great court, she was cast out by the court because it didn't want to listen to anything. It never hear her plea, and it never looked to the side of the jealousy that Norway carry towards Unomkhubulwane. This created a space where the season pattern were never stable. Was before that, they had one ultimate season. It was just a rainy time and the sunny time, or sunshine and rainy. They didn't have a dried season, or the fall in English, where things will fall and deteriorate. And then we get cold, we need hibernation. Because winter has those symbolism where we want to hibernate ourselves. So they make sure in the court of Abakulu that we must arrest her, we must put our verdict. And that verdict is to put her into the underworld. And with her absence, the whole entire world suffered. All the natural thing and organs that depended on Nomkhubulwane or Mama's love and bountiful presence and comfort, they suffered, and some conspire in order to save Nomkhubulwane from the underworld. Because Nowoiwo had already made Nomkhubulwane to marry one of Nowoi's servant known as Mangurudu or Nombuguru, who's the dark, savageous lord who live as legions of Nomkhubulwane in the underworld. Terrible with the look, who live with Nowoi, pardon me, in the underworld. Terrible with the look. So Nowoi was so excited to violate her sister that Ngunguru will violate her sister. And in that violation, Nowoi, since she's the ultimate law of the underworld, she proceed in the marriage and marrying Nomkhubulwane with Ngunguru, a dark lord, a general of the underworld. That is where now Nomkhubulwane lost in the traditional stories. They say she lost the empathy, the boundness, the love that she had for humanity and everything. And it was restored by these birds and all flying animals who plead and prayed that when they fly all around, they will bring back Nomkhubulwane. And by them flying with their wings, they created what we call the great whirlwinds, the four great winds. That's why the story is known as Imimoya Emekube 4, Uzamqolo, Nqongus, Umqele, Seteni, the tornadoes to others in English. So when they created this, it invaded the territory of Unoi. By invading the territory of Unoi, it created a space where Norway doesn't have power anymore. And it unalived a lot of servants of Norway. One of them was the one that was married to Nomkhubulwane. That is where Nomkhubulwane gets to come out from the underworld. And she come out because when she was in the way going up, the underworld is the underground of the world. When she was going up into the surface of the world, she was dried because she never had to drink. The whirlwinds were full of a dust that caused her to be thirsty, to be dehydrated. As far as when we are in winter, some of the things dehydrate, some of the rain doesn't happen too much when we are in the period of autumn and the winter. So she was dehydrated and she seek for a little bit of water. And one knows that you cannot drink the water in the underworld. You will owe the underworld, and it's a crime, which means a little piece of yours will be left in the underworld that you need to always go and collect. But by the way, she was thirsty. What could she do? That is why when she came out, she blessed her children and birds according to tradition now. These are things you'll see happening. According to tradition, the birds, every time when winter or autumn is about to approach in a territory of the southern hemisphere, they migrate, they go to the northern hemisphere where it is summer. When the winter is approaching in the northern hemisphere, they migrate back to the southern hemisphere. These are procession of animals and birds. We normally see them doing those things. Animals who still living in the world, continually practicing and following the pattern and the process of nature. We get it in the story. This is why it was recommended for animals to continue to do that prayer so that we don't experience again the harshness of the underworld taking over the whole entire beauty and the bountifulness and the essence of green nature. Where things deteriorate from green, they become brown. This is what happened. And we see that. The same story being told tells us that there were 7 judges. And then these 7 judges are ability, power supreme, even God's fear. Gods are terrible. They terror. When they see these 7 judges, they fear. So these 7 judges, without going to them and naming who they are and what, we can still see them being identified in the story of Inana, in the legends we get in Babylonian Sumer, or Ishtar, for people who will study Babylonian mythology. We'll get the same legend being told and say Ishtar or Inanna had a problem. And in the problem, one of her servants said that we need to plea. The humanity, it's so destructive. And some of humanity has already taken things from the underworld. So she needed to go to the underworld and she needed to go and meet her sister, Eregushi or Erekohushi, for people who study Babylonian. When she meets their sister, Eregushi, she was so excited. Before she entered there the 7 elders come in. Before Ishtar or Inanna enters the underworld, she had to be stripped from her 7 qualities that makes her superior, her 7 great abilities that makes her to govern the world of the surface and the celestial, meaning the heavens and the earth, but not the underworld. It's the same applies to Nomkhubulwane, who had ability of administrating the celestial, the skies, and the world. But she had to always get advice and inquiries of issues from Abakulu, who were 7, who are the most essential in potency to Nomkhubulwane's abilities, without explaining a lot. And then in the same story of our African legends, we get to be told about 3 months that when Nomkhubulwane gets to go inside the underworld and be kidnapped by Unoi, because even Inanna gets to be kidnapped to the underworld, as same as Nomkhubulwane, while she was pleading to the 7 great elders. Hence why Inanna had to go in the underworld been stripped naked, same as Nomkhubulwane, whom was violated by the servant of the underworld. We can get this same story linger in Greece. But now these 3 months we need to talk about. We all know that in the autumn equinox or the fall equinox, we get to see an experience of 3 months. Things are trying to deteriorate. We still have rains. We still have some blooming summer flowers that still strives, or trees. But when we enter the equinox, they start to fall or wither. This is the same story. It talks about that pattern, that the pattern of life, we will have an experience of 3 months to approach the darkest of the winter, of the darkest of the heart of Norway, where things have already deteriorated. And remember, a lot of people get sick during the autumn and the winter. It is called influenza. Some we call it a flu. In the old times, some other people could not heal those kind of illnesses because they were new. It doesn't mean it had to reach the recent century or the 11th century or the 19th century in order to heal flu. But we used to heal flu from long time. The story explained that those people had no knowledge at all on how to countercept the influenza because the winter system or the autumn, it is new for them. Their immune system are familiar to the hot weather, the heatful weather. They are familiar to the moisture and nature, things where the spring rains, things that is why majority of the people enjoy the summer. And in this case, the story itself has a similarity again with the story that we get in the Aztec. In the Aztec mythology, we get the same story, the story of Chacuarte and Uclate, known as the Lady of the Green Skirt. We get that in summer things become green. So that is why she's known as the Lady of the Green Skirt, because she needed to go to the underworld. And then when she go to the underworld, she was stripped of her clothing, that same skirt that Chikoso means. It means the lady with the green skirt. She needed to be stripped of her green skirt. And one of the objects that needed to be offered to her, it was one of the famous thing, the maize drink, also known as ukla or omboti, the Aztec. This is the Mayan story. Even to us, we do have that, where Unowoi had to have some drink, the water, because in the legends, it is said how Umkombot was introduced. I wouldn't go to that. We'll learn that legends. I will continue to teach you these traditional legends. Just subscribe and continue to like our YouTube. In the legends, it says here, Norway had to drink, which means she was consuming not water. She was consuming tempered water. This tempered water is umqombothi. That is why we offer umqombothi during the winter, in the spring, autumn equinox, as same as the spring equinox, in order to symbolize the change, the transformancy, and the gift to the elders whom put their Vedic, who are known as Abakulu, who put their Vedic to Nomkhubulwane to go to the underworld. As same as Easter in Babylonia, they have that same tradition. As same as the Aztec, where they will offer the maize and umqombothi and potatoes and some of the food items that grew underground. Like potatoes, we know they grew underground. So it's a symbol of the underworld. It's a symbol of the communication of the underworld. And then in our daily life, we do experience brightful systems of our life where life is so beautiful. That is where the story, when it has changed and reached Egypt, in Kemet, it is told with that, I will use English names, that Osiris, or Osiris was in prison and put in a coffin by his brother Seth, and with other 72 comrades who helped Seth in suppressing Osiris, known as Soker Ombera. This is where Isis look for her husband, because it's the same thing as Inana when she go to Eragushi. Eragushi has lost her husband, and that same husband used to love Inana. She used to date Inana, according to the legends. So Inana arrested Erekushi arrested Inana in the underworld so that she can stay for long because of that jealousy. But she used the idea of that you came here to usurp the throne. That is not to mourn the husband, because in the Sumeria it's a different. But now in Egypt they tell you that Isis had to travel for 6 months, for 3 months looking for the honorable Osiris, and then for other 3 months having news from the king who has already found the coffin of the coffin of Osiris. And then that king who found the coffin of Osiris presented it to Isis as a gift. But Isis, she had to disguise herself. She had to hide herself and become a servant, which means for 3 months she became a servant of this particular king. This is how the Egyptian story of Isis and Osiris was taught. That is why after that they give birth to the son. That son is Heru. It is the summer, it is a spring where spring blossom or it arises. But in Egypt doesn't mean they called spring Heru, but it symbolized that the symbol of the highness or greatness of going up. That is why even in the stories that are taught traditionally in Africa by the Bantu, they say the Nomkhubulwane had to go down. And then when the summer comes, meaning when she comes out from the underworld through the four winds, she had to go up. And we do get those four winds during the winter time. When the winter ends, for people who are in the southern hemisphere, you know that you experience winter. You experience the winds during what we call August. And they start July to August. And then in September, that is where we get to experience the spring equinox. And same applies to people who are in the northern hemisphere. They know that they experience the winds normally during the times of January and February. That is where their spring equinox will come in March. These are told in the story, the four winds. And these winds are different. Go and study them in Wikipedia. They will tell you about 4 kinds of different winds or whirlwinds. These are the same things you experience. That is why legendary stories were told to explain situation that humanity will found themselves, or ecology, or marking of the year. That is why these winds will not be a coincidence to be 4. And then apparently in this time we have 4 seasons. So this is a way to explain our marking of the year, a calculation system through mythology, and to adapt to the understanding of the change. And the same thing that happened to us, that you have your sour times. You are too sour. You are possessed by your narcissistic behavior. You don't understand the collectivity or the unison of existence with everything. And somewhere you do get sick if we have to not identify it in your heart that winter, or in your mind where you think bad about other people, or you plan bad or conspire against other people. In your own nature, immune system, you do get sick because you've been having a summertime. You have beautiful sweets, cold drinks that taste so sweet, lipid acids like food that we consume, that you were happy, you were content when you consume them, but they will cause harm or sickness. This is the same thing that the story talks about. Winter, underworld, it symbolizes drought, sufferation. We can go back again to where we are told that the winter itself, it's a symbol of sickness, where we get sick. Hence why for people who are not sick, they hibernate. Why there's hibernation? That is why we say underworld. Underworld, it means they close themselves. For people who know about initiation in Africa, initiation in Africa happens during autumn. That is where initiation or itwasa angena. Amatwasa angena during the what we call autumn equinox. Kungena amatwasa ke lapho. Humans who come to learn the mysteries or any form of knowledge traditionally. Even the initiation of man and woman. We were talking about the initiation of knowledge system, the mystery knowledge, but even the initiation of man happened during the winter or autumn. That's where it starts. It starts autumn and it ends when the winter ends. This symbolizes the going of the underworld, them going to the underworld, and then in the underworld being suffer. It's same thing or experience destitute. Same thing in initiation. When we go to initiation, we experience harsh conditions. And we need to learn from those harsh conditions. That is why in our storytelling, they tell us about winter and they tell us about violating and all those things. These are symbols of harsh conditions. These are symbols of sickness in the human body when we take it physically. These are symbols of ignorance when we take it to initiation. That you don't know anything that you are taught there. You're being introduced that umhlaba uyahlaba. So you need to understand the pain of the world. That through the pain of the world, one can ascend, uzokhuphuka, and experience the four great winds that are applied with your intelligence and your enlightenment. That you pass the animal stage and the intelligent state and the divine state, and you become the ultimatum consciousness that is superior. It's known as the conscious mind, subconscious, and supraconscious in psychology, and the ultimatum consciousness. To explain this in simple layman terms, it is says animalic state, it's when you behave reactionally. You don't think, you don't do anything. You are controlled by your emotions. There's a lot of people we do that. You control by emotions. Someone swear at you, you respond by fighting back to them. Like in America, when white people call you nigger, you respond by saying, no, 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 nigger, and you hit them out. So these are reactionary, animalic state. We can get it anyway. In people who are in love with someone because they were triggered by emotions, they didn't have to reason with them, they just become intimate. The winter, ignorance, animal. It when it says animal, it doesn't mean animal are not smart. They have their smart instinct behavior. But we are talking about instinct. Instinct, it's an animal domain. Animals' intelligence dominate instincts. That is why animals can sense anything, no matter it come from the back or forward. And animals don't reason that, oh, this place is not the place I would like to sit. They make that place a comfort and create their own comfort space. They pee at that place so that it may smell like them. This is instinct. You cannot go all around pee around your yard in order to make others who will come to your yard know that this is your yard. It will smell bad. So that is why we say animalic state, and hence why majority of the people, when they become in their animalic state, it can never be explained. Those reactions, you can never explain them until you reach what we call intelligent state, the second state. When you are intelligent, you reason things. No matter someone argues with you, it doesn't mean you better. But no matter someone argues with you, you reason. Is it necessary to fight if they call me nigger? Must I respond? What's the benefit of this response? Which means you reason things, you discern them, you quantify them. You don't just do things out of animalic state. People, oh, we believe in this. They just believe it without researching it, without making proper provision. They accept that, yeah, those ones, we hate them. They oppress us. Yeah, that is a wrong thing. That is the animalic state. That is winter. That is low. So it needs the fourth wings so that you can come out of that. The second one, it must be intelligence. Because with intelligence, then we can calculate things, we can view things, we can navigate ourselves towards the world because we analyze everything. And the third one, it's where we talk about divine consciousness. It's when someone, they experience miraculous phenomenon. Others wouldn't explain them with their intelligence, and others wouldn't understand that, but they don't react like animals. That thing can be justified that they've done, and it's miraculously, like predicting, like prophesying. Those are simple aspects of identifying the divine state of consciousness. And then the fourth state, the ultimatum consciousness. Ultimatum consciousness, it is a consciousness that is supra consciousness, or in psychology it's called like that, supra consciousness. It influences it's when someone will feel like, I have some presence in me, I have things, and everything they deal about, it is contained with that presence and with some miracles, divine intelligence, meaning the divine consciousness with intelligence here, and animalic state. These are the four great winds. These are four great winds that symbolize the four seasons changing, that symbolize the intelligence and the ascendancy of higher understanding of humanity. Emotions are that animalic state. And when these emotions are used for greater cause are when Nomkhubulwane, or Great Ma, comes out of the underworld. Emotions are when Uma gets to be subjugated in the underworld, or when Inana gets to be subjugated in the underworld. So this story and these stories are not just stories to make us bubble to ourselves or laugh about, or we say, oh, these are fictional stories. And we say, they don't make sense. They carry no way in my life. They do carry a way because they are esoterically and symbologically. They can be interpreted to explain our daily life, our personal life, our social life, our environment, our geology, our astrology, our astronomy, and to even explain, etc., scientific stuff, mathematical and calculation and numbers, even chemistry. I'm forbid in this platform to teach you chemistry, but it does explain chemistry, that story of the underworld, because we can still get it when we come out from Africa and we don't use Egypt, we don't use Sumer, Babylonia, we don't use the Aztec, the Olmecs. We go now to Europe, the Greeks. Remember, I've explained how the Greeks were influenced by Africans when Solon came here in Africa, in the life where we talk about the moon. So the Greeks themselves have the similar story. And in that same story, Penelope gets to be kidnapped by Hades. And the plot is set by Zeus, whom Zeus knew that Penelope's mother will have a problem. And Penelope, when she get kidnapped into the underworld, Hermes helped Penelope's mother. And then when Hermes helped Penelope's mother with the message to the underworld, Penelope was saved after 6 months. And then each and every 6 months, when it ended, Penelope had to go back to her husband, Hades. Because Penelope, when she was kidnapped to the underworld, where Hades lived, she had to get married with Hades. Do you hear the similarity here? Being kidnapped, being taken to the underworld, and getting married. We understand now the politics at play, the social construct that this is influenced by Zeus. We understand that. That Metria gets jealousy because she's one of Zeus's wife or girlfriend, I mean to say, mistresses, who used to have some sort of clandestine intimacy with Zeus. Because Zeus wanted that. And Mithria was always busy attending her daughter. Oh, Penelope, oh, Penelope. That is why Zeus plot and plan for that. And Zeus owed Hades. So he planned, I'm going to give you one of the goddesses' child, so that they can be your wife there. You don't get bored in the underworld. So these are stories that can relate to African stories. It is a story because of influence. That is why it relates. And through the transformance and change of things, and new stories get to be introduced, meaning new religions in some other people's psyche. When these new stories get to be introduced, the old stories, they lose value. Yet they still have influence of our daily life. Because the old psyche still lingers in our ingram, in our DNA, that we still behave the same way as our old ancestors. We still experience the same weather patterns like our old ancestors, and the stars still move the same procession like our old ancestors. It's the same thing, etc., etc. So the stories we learn, they're not only for religious sake, but they even help us to understand the rituals we do, the initiation we put ourselves in or we experience personally. They even explain our evolution. So what I will leave everybody with is the love of mythology is necessary. The love of traditional knowledge must be brought back. And the understanding of scientific meaning towards this traditional knowledge, and why these stories are intensely talking about ideas that majority of the people who have conditioned themselves with recent news stories will never understand. Because these stories were meant to tell us the oldest way of understanding nature that still happen. One cannot say, I understand nature without understanding these processes and where they are from. As far as we're going to explain the first time winter came, and we're going to tell that story in the other lives. But now, since we are explaining about this story, I know majority of the people are questioning themselves that why this story is so important and it can linger everywhere. How did it reach South America to the Aztec and the Olmecs? How did it reach there in the Americans' land? How did it reach the Sumer lands? How did it reach? Because Egypt is close, it's in Africa. Because this story is told in Southern Africa of Nomkhubulwane. It's a Southern African story of the Bantu. The Bantu you get in the Southland talk about this story. This is why we get to know history through these stories and compare. And these stories are not just stories. There's a lot of other nations that say this same story, but it is told differently. And they explain one thing: the winter, the introduction of winter, or the marking of the yearly system, or the sun, or the evolution of planet Earth around the sun. That is why we know that it is going to the northern hemisphere. Not the sun going to the northern hemisphere, but the drift of planet Earth exists. It drifts in a way that it gives the northern hemisphere access to the sun, where the southern hemisphere doesn't have access to the sun. That is why things they deteriorate, because they cannot absorb more rays and heat. And we know that heat is rejuvenating. It has photosynthesis that make things to grow and synthesize the energy. These rays are even identified as the gift of life in Kemet, the rays of the sun. That's why it is tamelilanga, ilama lishushu. And someone can say rahashu in hieroglyphic that is mistranslated. But in a proper hieroglyphic, sizothi sithamela ilanga lishushu. These are words we use correlating to the beauty and the ideologies and the principles that comes with the sun. That when the sun penetrates into the rays, it needs to pass through shu. When you study Egyptology. So this story, it's about the sun, the story of Ma or Nomkhubulwane going to the underworld. It explains how the sun is taken away from us, as same as Isis, who's looking for her husband for 6 months. It explains that Osiris, who's a representative of Ra, the sun, is taken away. But now, to make it more nicer, they're like, oh, since he passed away, he gave birth, Isis gave birth to the son of Osiris called Heru or Horus. The same Horus who symbolized the sun in his upper appeal. That is why it's the falcon with the halo of the sun in the crown. Because they are telling you a story and they're telling you things that happen in your daily life. These are African by its origin. Into Zabantu. We are the ones who understand that when we say ilanga lishushu kakhulu or kusepsika, we know that psika, it's enshrined, it's being hibernated, it's being imprisoned. We know that it's dysfunctionally busikisiki ngesixhosa, meaning dysfunctionally chaotic. That is African knowledge system. An African knowledge system has a way to explain how your eyes see by a mythology. They can tell you a myth. They have a way how you can travel outer body experience through mythology. They have a way to explain a lot of phenomena that we see with mythology. As far as they explain chemistry using mythology, as far as they explain human occultic change, that humans change, human transmutancy, they explain it through using stories. That Nomkhubulwane, she was found guilty according to the 7 elders, the great governors. And then Nomkhubulwane had to go and get in prison. If you don't accept your own guilt and things that you do, you suffer them forever. But Nomkhubulwane had to come out from all that persecution because he accepted her fault by creating humanity. Greetings to everybody who just came in. Greetings, pardon me for not greeting you. I was teaching the legends. Greetings, Lera Modua, Nyambura. Greetings to Kisaelelo. Seasonal greetings. Yes, we have come in to the autumn season. This is a legend that talks about the winter, how autumn and winter were placed or disputed by our ancient forefathers in storytelling, and what necessary things were needed or tools were that were needed to be utilized in those spaces. Um, with much being said, I would like to continue and close the same story by saying the stories of the goddesses and the gods of our tradition. The goddesses are always the stories from the ancient times. They're the ones who dominated in all humanity and all beings. Our story talk about the man and the woman. Our goddesses were greater than the gods. The goddesses assume superior power than the gods. We have begun a lot of tales that we told you. Yet these tales are told in the African version. And the African version is older than time itself. The stories that explain where planet Earth was consumed by fire, or it had a lot of dominated fire. It was burning hot. You couldn't live in the surface. But some other people could survive in the surface. That is why some of us, we have a dark skin or darker skin, or we inherited the darker skin. And we can explain that the stories of us before we came to planet Earth, traveling the stars, we get them through mythology. And they teach us about beautiful things, beautiful scientific achievement that was achieved by our ancestors and the old people. These stories can be used for development, for character changing, for helping young people to moderate their behavior, and grown people to moderate their behavior, for destabilizing anger, jealousy, envy, for stripping down deceitful act in the world. Let's continue to subscribe in Zamalek Giza's YouTube and like and share the video to others so that they can know. And let's all try by all means to share the love. For what I've told today and what will be told next time, let's wait for it and learn what has been told today and utilize it in our daily life. May you please enjoy the autumn for people who are in the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, enjoy your spring. For autumn and winter will come soon after 6 months. Ashe.